Alright, man, peace. You know, brothers, in retrospect, just looking back, I think that one of the most insightful and revelatory statements that LeBron James ever made about himself was when he stated that he watches The Godfather and The Godfather 2 over and over and over again. Because that explains many of the personality quirks that LeBron James consistently conveys in many of his actions, where he uses a lot of diabolical mechanisms to make certain people think that he's their ally, when in actuality, he's just biding his time to overthrow them. We see that with many of the coaches that he acts like he embraces, when in reality, he's trying to see in what way he can usurp their authority over him. We saw it with Eric Spoelstra down there with the Miami Heat. We saw it with David Blatt when LeBron originally came back to Cleveland. And I believe that very soon we're going to see it with Mr. Luke Walton, who I have stated many videos ago is going to be collateral damage when the LA Lakers finally do acquire Mr. LeBron James. There's no way in the world that LeBron is going to be receptive to what Mr. Luke Walton has to say, but he's going to play the good soldier for now because he does not want to look like what he is, that being a coach killer. And I believe that Magic Johnson is confederate with LeBron in wanting Luke Walton gone, but they can't just fire him right now because he's pretty much been the darling of the coaching world in regards to who the media was billing as the next great coach because he acted as a student under Mr. Steve Kerr. There's no doubt in my mind that eventually Luke Walton will be let go. It's just a matter of time when we see the combustible nature of the LA Lakers roster, as well as the machinations, the Machiavellian practices of Mr. LeBron James, that Luke Walton is a dead man walking. Anyway, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
So, if you've been living under a rock, LeBron James is a Laker. The King agreed to a 4-year, $153.3 million contract with the Lakers on Sunday. Now, according to Yahoo Sports, LeBron had zero contact with head coach Luke Walton during the recruitment process, and as of Wednesday, the two still have not met.
Isn't that amazing? You're LeBron Ramon James. You decided that you're going to take your talents to the LA Lakers, and you have such a disregard for the head coach of the team that you're going to be playing for that you make no attempt to speak with him, but you speak with Mr. Magic Johnson and Rob Pelinka. I don't know if that will be considered best practice when it comes to team chemistry building when allegedly you have aspirations to win a world title with that squad.
Max, what does it mean to you that LeBron reportedly hasn't spoken to Luke yet?
It means to me that LeBron James looks at Luke Walton more as a peer than an elder or a coach or anyone that has something to teach him. What that means to me is that LeBron James intends on engrafting the LeBron James system into whatever so-called offensive schemes that Luke Walton may be running. I've stated for a very long time now that Luke Walton is not the right fit for the personnel that the Lakers have. As of right now, they've gotten rid of the little bit of shooting that they had at one time. They have even less shooting now. So running the Golden State Warriors offense makes no sense whatsoever. So what all those things add up to is Mr. Luke Walton being fired somewhere around the All-Star break, which is modus operandi for LeBron James. He normally implodes somewhere around the All-Star break. Expect LeBron to be sending out cryptic tweets and all types of subliminal memes on Instagram and Snapchat and Facebook or what have you, basically trying to detail how he does not have enough help and he doesn't trust the coach.
It means Luke Walton is not Magic Johnson's guy, and certainly not LeBron James's guy.
Yes, and I've been saying that for a very long time. Well before LeBron James decided to take his talents to LA, I said that in order for LeBron James to come to the team, Luke Walton was going to be gone. I also said that Lonzo Ball is going to be gone. So watch out for that, even though I think that Lonzo, as well as his dad, were able to concoct a strategy that will allow them to stay with the Lakers for at least this season.
But that doesn't mean that they won't choose to continue with him as coach and support him. He's just going to have to prove it to them, and it clearly means they have questions. I think Luke Walton is an excellent coach.
Well, Max Kellerman, for you to state that he is an excellent coach, you would have to establish some type of precedent where you could say Luke Walton was here and he was able to raise the overall acumen of his team. Everyone is going to point to his tenure with the Golden State Warriors, but that team ran on automatic. Everybody knows that. He's been with the LA Lakers for a couple of seasons now. There's been an infinitesimal amount of improvement, not quite enough to establish how good a coach he is right now. We do know that he's going to be going through the most tumultuous period of his coaching life, having to coach Mr. LeBron James.
As someone who was doing drive time in LA during all of this, and we're ESPN flagship state, the home of the Lakers, a broadcasting home of the Lakers in LA, I was psyched when they got Luke Walton. That was a very good move. Let's not forget that his record as interim coach of the Warriors, and you can say what you want, anyone could coach the Warriors, was better than Steve Kerr's. Luke Walton is a promising, young, bright coach who even people like Kobe Bryant can tell you kind of always been a coach, even when he was a player. Very smart student of the game.
When Kobe Bryant states that Luke Walton has always been a coach, what he means is that he's that dude that sat at the end of the bench and knew what was going on the court because he very rarely got time on the court. When you look at most of the more prominent coaches in the NBA that actually played in the NBA, the vast majority of them were bench warmers or bench players, role players, because they understood what it took to just hang on by a thread in the NBA. Things never came easy to them. So they respect the process a lot more than the superstars did. That's why Magic Johnson and Michael Jordan never would have made good coaches. Magic tried to coach, he was terrible. Larry Bird was a very good coach because he was smart enough to know that he had no business really coaching. He gave those duties over to his assistants. I believe Dick Harder and Rick Carlisle were his assistant coaches, and Rick Carlisle was a bench player for those mid-'80s Celtics before he became an assistant under Larry Bird, and then eventually gained his own stardom coaching the Pistons and the Pacers and now the Mavericks. So that's what Kobe means. Luke Walton is someone who rode the bench long enough to learn how the game was played, to learn the politics of the NBA. Phil Jackson also was a bench player for the Knicks in the early 70s, as was Pat Riley, a bench player for the LA Lakers.
And good communicator with the players. But nevertheless, he predates Magic Johnson, and clearly he predates LeBron James. And I am sure that part of Magic Johnson's pitch to LeBron James included the fact that LeBron James would have a lot of say in what goes on, including personnel, including coach.
Try all say in what goes on. I guarantee you, when Magic Johnson called LeBron James into his office, or when he went to LeBron James's house to meet with him, if Rob Pelinka was with him, Magic Johnson looked at Rob Pelinka and says, "You know what, Rob, you're doing a great job, just unbelievable. But why don't you take your ass into the winery and get me and LeBron a glass of something to drink, and then sit your ass over there and be quiet while we talk about basketball."
Coaches, etc. And why wouldn't Magic want that? Magic Johnson was and is a basketball genius. And so is LeBron James. And Magic Johnson is also an extremely successful businessman, something else LeBron James wants to be, which indicates
Magic Johnson is an extremely successful mascot for his corporate sponsors, as is LeBron James.
That Magic is a basketball genius, but also just a very high functioning, at the very least, cerebral guy, as is LeBron James. So their decision making is important, and the fact that LeBron James would have influence is important. It's actually the right way to do things.
I wouldn't say that it's the right way to do things, but it's the only way that they were going to be able to get LeBron James to come play with them, is the understanding that he was going to run the LeBron James system. LeBron and his team actually orchestrated a quote-unquote courtesy meeting with the Philadelphia 76ers, and LeBron, of course, true to his reputation, did not even bother to show up. So he already knew that if he went to the Philadelphia 76ers, he would not be able to run the LeBron James system. So all that talk about him being willing to play off the ball, that's nothing but nonsense. And you're going to see him and Rajon Rondo clash heads all throughout this up-and-coming regular season. I'm going to tell you something. That LA Lakers experiment with LeBron James, that is going to be the best reality television on the air.
And I think what this suggests is the jury is out on Luke Walton. Stephen A., not that he might not get their support, but I don't think he has it yet.
Well, the bottom line is that Luke Walton was a Genie Bus, Jim Bus, and Mitch Kupchak hire. It wasn't Magic Johnson and Rob Pelinka. You're right about that. But I'm going to throw a wrench in all of this. And I want to preface my comment by saying this is not inside information at all. What I gave you about Damian Lillard and Kawhi Leonard and LeBron and all of those guys over the last week or so, that's inside information. This is just an opinion. I would keep my eyes on Phil Jackson. Yes, I said it. Phil Jackson. The same Phil Jackson that offended LeBron James and his crew by calling them a posse, minimizing them, all of this other stuff. I would keep my eye on Phil Jackson. Here is why.
Let me say this before Stephen A. Smith goes into his theory as to why Phil Jackson may make a return to the LA Lakers as a head coach. I just don't buy it. Phil Jackson has a history of, yes, coaching superstar players to their optimal level. But with the Lakers, it's always been understood that they had to have a great big man in order for Phil Jackson to want to be there. And I just don't see him having the interest to coach one of these quote-unquote millennial-minded basketball players like LeBron James is, who's going to be continuously asking why. And he's going to be resistant to the triangle, and we know that that is what Phil Jackson is going to want to install. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. Could I see Phil Jackson possibly acting as a consultant to Luke Walton? Who knows? Maybe. But I think that Luke Walton better watch himself if that happens, because if LeBron James catches wind that Luke is conferring with Phil Jackson in any way, LeBron may turn on Luke Walton even faster than he would have had LeBron James gotten the opportunity to realize that Luke did not know what the hell he was doing organically.
Number one, Luke Walton, 2 seasons, still hasn't made the playoffs. I would agree with you, Max. I love the job that he's done. I love the development of players under him. I'm a fan of Luke Walton's. I think he should stay on board. But he wasn't Magic Johnson and Rob Pelinka's choice. Point number one. Point number two, when Kobe Bryant and I talked on my radio show a couple of days ago, Kobe spoke to LeBron during the playoffs. Kobe spoke to LeBron to welcome him to the family once LeBron had agreed to come on board to LA. Kobe Bryant perhaps is one of the most unforgiving people in the world if he feels betrayed. Let me tell you that right now. He don't play.
Well, Stephen A., I think that you'll find that most highly intelligent people operate according to that mode of thinking, that they don't have time to fuck around. And if you intend to intrude upon their life with any type of trickery, chicanery, or insincerity, they're going to remove you and you're not going to be allowed back.
All right?
And let me also say this. Stephen A. Smith states that Kobe Bryant and LeBron spoke during the playoffs. I'm sure that when they were speaking during the playoffs, Kobe Bryant told LeBron James the same thing in their conversation as he was stating to the mainstream media in regards to what LeBron James needs to do. That's why I stated that much of what the media was trying to make of Kobe's statements was just them trying to amp up quote-unquote jealousy between Kobe and LeBron. I don't think that Kobe is jealous of LeBron James at all. I just believe that he thinks that he's better than LeBron, and he has the right to think that.
You recall that book that Phil Jackson wrote about him, throwing him under the bus, calling them uncoachable, and all of this other stuff when Phil wanted to profit off of that stuff by writing the book after?
No, when he just told the truth, that Kobe was uncoachable during his first tenure there, which is the truth.
After, he had supposedly retired from LA, who forgave him? Kobe.
Nigga, please. Kobe Bryant was desperate. He needed Phil Jackson to come back. It wasn't about him forgiving Phil Jackson. You act like the Lakers had won 55 games and had been to the Western Conference Finals and lost in 7. And then Kobe said, you know what, Phil, I forgive you. I saw you out on Rodeo Drive panhandling. So I told Dr. Jerry Buss to hire you back. Like, give me a break.
Why? Because Kobe was trying to win championships. And being...
So in other words, he didn't forgive him. He did what was best for him, Stephen A. Smith. Forgiveness is what you do out of general principles. It's not what you do because it's expedient.
Being coached or under others wasn't going to cut it. If Kobe Bryant can forgive him, let's transition to LeBron James. Did you see what Dan Gilbert wrote about LeBron James in 2010? How awful that letter was? And look what LeBron did. LeBron not only left for South Beach, he came back because he said, it's bigger than my relationship with him. The city of Cleveland, fans in the Northeast Ohio area, the Cleveland Cavaliers franchise and its surrounding areas, all of this other stuff, that usurps whatever beef is going on between me and Dan Gilbert. And that...
Yes, and in addition to that, Stephen A. Smith, LeBron James and his team understood that it was time to go back to the Midwest area that LeBron came from and re-ingratiate himself with that fan base, because if he did not do that, he would never be able to mobilize a lot of the business ventures that he has planned down the line. I believe that LeBron James plans on buying the Cleveland Cavaliers sometime in, I won't say the near future, but the relatively near future, probably in the next 10 to 15 years or so, and possibly even running for political office in the state of Ohio. So he needed to get back in the good graces of the people of Ohio. So he wasn't thinking about no damn Dan Gilbert.
Stance by Dan Gilbert. That letter was far, far, far more incendiary than some backhanded slap that Phil Jackson gave to LeBron and his crew. So let me be very, very clear. If LeBron can forgive Dan Gilbert for that stuff enough to move on and do business with him, I'm quite sure if Luke Walton runs into some problems and changes needed to be made, it's certainly plausible that Phil Jackson could get a call. From whom, you might ask? Not just from the wonderful Jeannie Buss, his ex-fiance, who he was sitting next to when Shaq's statue was revealed. And
yes, that's exactly what Phil Jackson wants. He wants to rekindle a relationship with his ex-fiance and LeBron James. Come on, Stephen A. Smith. I guarantee if they call up Phil gonna be at home smoking some primo shit, talking about, put LeBron on the phone. I want to hear his voice, and I want him to apologize to me. I want him to say, "Dear Big Chief Triangle, I apologize. If I can't get that, goodbye."
And I was right there. But also a guy like Irvin Magic Johnson, along with any basketball mind who...
And Jeannie Buss, I want you to come over to my place with red lingerie on, and don't ask any questions.
Who recognizes no matter how inept, how moribund, how disgraceful, how negligent Phil Jackson's leadership was as president of basketball operations.
Yes, Phil Jackson's leadership of the New York Knicks was so negligent that he was able to execute the greatest draft pick by an executive of the New York Knicks since Patrick Ewing. Yes, he was that negligent. Phil Jackson inherited a bunch of nonsense, and he did the best that he could. Was he truly a great executive, general manager, etc.? Not quite, but he was nowhere near as bad as Stephen A. Smith and or Max Kellerman will make him out to be.
For the New York Knicks, no one would dare question his greatness as a head basketball coach in the NBA, particularly when it comes to stars.
Oh, wait a minute.
One quick question. I just want a yes or no answer, then Max, you have the floor. Would you like this move? Would you like Phil Jackson to coach?
Me personally, that depends on whether Luke Walton's working out. I like Luke.
Right.
I want to give Luke a chance.
Cut it out, Negro. Just answer the damn question. I don't see Phil Jackson coming back to coach this team. Once again, he's going to want to reinstall the triangle offense. It's going to take too long for the players to learn in the regular season. Beyond that, LeBron James will not be receptive to the triangle offense. Many of the more modernized stars in the NBA do not believe that the triangle offense is an offense that's conducive to winning in the current climate of the NBA. And plus, LeBron James does not respect Phil Jackson on an emotional level. And I don't think that Phil wants to be bothered dealing with millennials and their why questions all the time when they don't know shit.
But if the Lakers sat up there and said, excuse me, with this squad we have, particularly with the temperamental dudes, supposedly in Rondo and Lance Stevenson and others, and us getting some stars and the allure of LA and all the pressure that comes with it, if we needed a bigger name, a bigger presence, I wouldn't be averse to that.
Stephen A., hold that thought.
Stephen A. Smith. When Phil Jackson was ready to coach mercurial personalities, it was because they had talent on the level of a Dennis Rodman, of a Kobe Bryant, of a Shaquille O'Neal. That's what he does. He takes all-time great talents and he deals with their personality quirks and streamlines them so that they can be the best versions of themselves. Phil Jackson has always shown that when he's looking at a marginal star or a marginal superstar like a Carmelo Anthony, or even a superstar like LeBron James, who's never truly been taught how to play the NBA game on a level that will allow him to win championships consistently, that he'll pass. If Phil Jackson can get his hands on you when you're young, in your late 20s or early 20s like he did Kobe, or mid-20s like Michael Jordan, or mid-20s, early 20s like he had Scottie Pippen, late 20s like he had Shaquille O'Neal, then yeah, he'll work with you. But LeBron James is 33 years old. He's stuck in his ways. Phil Jackson's not trying to break him out of what he is.
We'll continue the conversation. I just want to welcome everybody into our First Take afternoon special as we hit 5 o'clock p.m. Eastern time. Max, get involved in the conversation here now.
Well, thanks, Molly. I would say, Stephen A., when you said no one would dare question Phil Jackson's greatness, I agree about his legacy. But I will question his efficacy as a head coach in the NBA today, absolutely, and many would. I think that would be a disastrous hire for the Lakers. I think the game had...
I think that Phil Jackson is too smart to allow himself to be immersed in today's NBA culture. I think that he looks around at what's going on and he believes that the inmates are running the asylum and he does not want to be just a prop.
Game has passed Phil Jackson by. Let me be very clear. He's forgotten more basketball than I ever know, I understand. But I recall he's so doctrinaire about the triangle, meaning he sticks to those principles. He claims it's because he believes it promotes the right kind of teamwork generally, but philosophically. But that's not true. He sticks to the triangle in the face of a changing league, to the point that
the reason why Phil Jackson is such a stickler for the triangle is because that's a religion for him, Max Kellerman. It's not just a way of basketball, it's a way of life. Phil Jackson is a Luciferian. And oftentimes, once again, people conflate the term Luciferian with Satanist. I'm not saying necessarily that Phil Jackson is a Satanist, but he is a Luciferian. He deals with a lot of esoteric / occultic beliefs. And the triangle and the triangle offense is part and parcel of that. He adheres to sentiments like transcendental meditation, things of that nature. He likes to tap into his quote-unquote pineal gland and float off on the astral plane. So that's why he has such strict adherences to the quote-unquote triangle offense. He believes in it with all his heart.
He sent out that tweet, "How's it going?" about, remember when he misspelled going, about teams who shoot a lot of threes? Actually, the way it was going is that those were the only teams that advanced in the playoffs. The game had totally changed, and he refused to change with it.
Well, here's the problem with what you're saying, Max Kellerman, and I do agree to a degree that Phil Jackson has been passed by, but all great men get passed by. All men, period, get passed by. Phil Jackson was an all-time great coach, but still, yes, he got passed by. But as you've already noted, he's forgotten more about basketball than you will ever know. But let's make the record show that the most successful NBA coach was a former student, a former protege of Phil Jackson by the name of Steve Kerr, who actually utilized a certain components of the triangle in the Golden State Warriors offense.
He refused to adapt the way Popovich adapted, even though he said he didn't like all the threes that were shot.
Well, you know, you're being a bit unfair in regards to Phil Jackson and his lack of adaptation because he was not in the league long enough to show that he was unwilling to adapt. He retired after the 2011 season. And when he retired, the Lakers were still a playoff team. I believe they got to the second round that year. They got swept by the Mavericks. But it wasn't like he was the coach of a team that won 30 games and he was still trying to have them run the Princeton offense or something like that.
Phil Jackson was saying, he said it, I forgot which conference, he talked about the fact that a lot of threes lead to a lot of fast breaks. He is philosophically opposed to the way the game is played successfully today.
No, sir. What Phil Jackson is opposed to is copycatting. Phil Jackson believes that you can nullify what the Warriors do. Once again, he sees the game differently. He knows for a fact that the Warriors, even though they're a great team for this era, they would not be as successful back in the 90s because teams would get physical. They would slow the game down as opposed to trying to jack up threes along with you and feeding into your strength. That's how he sees the game. He doesn't see it from a copycat perspective. He sees it stylistically. He says to himself, okay, they like to jack up wild threes. Steph Curry likes to make a lot of bad decisions. Draymond Green is emotionally unstable. Kevin Durant is someone who you can get to doubt themselves. Klay Thompson is someone who's probably the most mentally stable of anyone on the team, but he cannot create his own shot off the dribble. That's how he looks at that team. That's how he looks at the game. He doesn't look at it like how you look at it, like, oh, wow, everybody's shooting threes, so let's us shoot threes. That's not how he looks at it. That's never how he's going to look at it because he's looking at it from a higher level, from an ego point of view, not from an ant point of view.
And I think he would be a disaster as a head coach today for these Lakers or for anyone.
Well, like I said, I'm not going to go so far as that. I'm not going to be as blasphemous as that. He's an 11-time champion, and his unwillingness to change and to adapt as an executive with the New York Knicks is entirely different than what he would be on the sidelines. I think on the sidelines, having to literally sit there and watch these guys perform, I think he would be of the mindset of doing what works. And I
agree. I just think that Phil Jackson, and we oftentimes find this from great teachers, they can be stuck in their ways. But I think that he would be far less adaptable in how to deal with the personality types of today than he would the stylistic game in the NBA. I think that he would be amenable to altering certain components of the triangle if he thought that it was going to give his team an additional chance to win. But in regards to catering to players and things like that, he was not going to do that. even coaching players like Michael Jordan, even though Michael could be difficult because he was an alpha male. Michael came from a strong patriarchal household. He was coached in college by Dean Smith, so he was familiar with hard coaching. He was coached in the Olympics by Bobby Knight. Scottie Pippen came from a hard Scrabble background. He had to build himself up through a low Division I school, I believe Central Arkansas. So those players back then, they were far different than the players of today who are very coddled and have 8 or even 9-figure corporate sponsorship or endorsement deals with Nike and many of these other businesses where they don't even really need to give their all to the NBA because their life is set.
I also think that anybody that has been coached by him would validate that about him. Again, I'm not an advocate of Luke Walton losing his job at all. I like Luke, and I think he should be the coach. But I'm talking about, as Bill Plaschke, the columnist extraordinaire for the Los Angeles Times, he was on my radio show today, and we were going back and forth about this. And he accurately pointed out, which was why he expressed his concerns about some of the other temperamental personalities that Magic Johnson had brought in this squad. Bill Plaschke said, Stephen A., you know this, and I'll say this to you, Max, and you, Molly. You both know it because unlike me, who visits L.A. enough, and I'm here right now, you all lived in L.A.
Yeah.
L.A. has an awful lot of distractions. It's big time, and whereas you could be...
That's a great point. I could see Lance Stevenson getting caught out there with a couple of big booty hoes and not making it to the game on time.
Be the star, and everybody else gets lost in the shuffle in another city. In LA, everybody's under the microscope, and as a result of that, you might need a big time presence to offset all of that on behalf of the players. Luke Walton can't do that.
Max,
That's
let me
the point.
ask you this, because you spent a lot of time in LA and obviously covering this team. Do you think LA would actually ever consider this, bringing Phil back? Do you think, could you see the Lakers? I know you don't want it, but could you?
I don't see it, Molly. I think that Molly's asking the question over again because she sees it as how I see it, being something that truly just does not make sense.
Do you see them ever actually considering this?
I just want to be clear. Among competent front offices, the idea of bringing Phil Jackson back to be a head coach is a joke. He showed that not only has the league passed him by, but that he wasn't interested in coaching anymore, really.
I agree, sir.
Or being in the president of the Knicks anymore.
And once again, in regards to the league passing him by, I'm not talking about so much stylistically, even though to a degree that's relevant, but mostly in regards to how he would interact with players. The league is passing by.
Anymore. And his relationship with Jeannie is not what it once was, obviously, in terms of their status. I think that would be a disaster. I cannot believe a front office would seriously entertain it in LA.
Phil Jackson knows he can call up Jeannie Buss right now and say the keyword into the phone, and she'll come over to his place butt-ass naked with just a leopard print thong on, allegedly.
I will tell you this, I can't rule out anything. I don't disagree with you based on what I saw from Phil in New York. I am no fan of what he regressed to. There is no doubt about that. But I'm saying to you, if things are not what they should be with Luke Walton, I don't rule out anything with Jeannie and with Magic, because the one thing that Phil is in LA, and you both know this, he is absolutely positively adored and deified in LA circles. There is no doubt about that.
We'll leave it there, and your LeBron Gilbert example was spot on.
But anyway, that's pretty much it on that. We'll see what happens with Mr. Luke Walton in regards to how he's able to build up a rapport with LeBron James. I don't think that Luke is going to make it far past the All-Star break, but we'll see. So anyway, peace.